Effective patient-centered medical research is
answering questions that patients care about, but it's doing it in a way that is also involving them in every stage, all the way from defining the questions, to planning the study, to executing the study, and then disseminating the results. Communicate it in a way that they can actually use it.
Resulting in research created both for patients and by patients.
We can be a part of everything from concept all the way through looking at the data, interpreting the data, and then disseminating the information. There's no space where patients cannot be involved in a research project.
Discover patients are a virtue. The patient-centered research of PCORI and PCORnet inside this edition of CTSI Discovery Radio. Welcome to CTSI Discovery Radio. I'm your host, Brian Belmer. CTSI Discovery Radio is brought to you by the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeast Wisconsin. The CTSI is a consortium of researchers, doctors, scientists, and others representing 8 institutions, including the Medical College of Wisconsin, Milwaukee School of Engineering, Marquette University, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Children's Wisconsin, Froedtert Hospital, Versity Blood Center of Wisconsin, and the Zablocki VA Medical Center. The CTSI works collaboratively across all of our member institutions. Our mission is advancing health through research and discovery. Medical research is done to find new and better ways for improving the health and quality of life of patients. But while patients are the reason for medical research, they haven't always had a voice in what or how diseases and conditions are researched. However, today, we discover an entity that puts patients and caregivers at the center in creating and conducting research. We hear first from Dr. Claudia Grossman, Associate Director of the Research Data and Technology Unit of the Research Infrastructure and Innovation Division of the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, also known as PCORI. Dr. Grossman starts with a brief description of exactly what PCORI is.
PCORI is a nonprofit. We are not part of the federal government, but we are funded solely from federal funds. We're caretakers of federal resources. Our reason for being is to fund research which gives practical evidence so that folks can make better decisions about their healthcare choices.
And she gives us some history on how PCORI came to be.
PCORI was originally authorized by Congress in 2009, and we were reauthorized in 2019 with the idea of funding comparative clinical effectiveness research, which really just means research that can inform people's everyday decisions.
Again, PCORI is not a government agency, but they are
funded by federal funds, and that's exclusive. We're actually prohibited from taking funding from anywhere else. So we've been around for a little over 15 years now.
And in that time, have done some amazing work, in spite of the reality that
research doesn't move very fast. So we're in a great position now where we have a lot of research we funded, some great results, some good examples of real impact, and I think we're really excited for the next phase.
We asked Dr. Grossman to explain the hierarchy of PCORI and its entities, such as PCORnet. What's the difference there?
Great question, because actually it can be confusing. What is PCORI and what is PCORnet? Are they the same thing? Is PCORnet owned by PCORI? And the answer is no. PCORnet is an initiative of PCORI. We are a funder. Fundamentally, that is what we do. So we fund folks to carry out an initiative called PCORnet.
Okay, PCORI funds PCORnet. Got it. She goes on to explain PCORnet is a
very large national research network which leverages data, but also patient partnership and clinician expertise in order to do better research.
Perhaps even more accurately, think of PCORnet as a
network of networks So it kind of has a hub and spoke design to it. There's 8 clinical research networks, which are part of PCORnet, and each of those have sites.
Then, where does the Medical College of Wisconsin fit into this network of networks?
MCW is a site which is part of the Greater Plains Collaborative Clinical Research Network. The GPC, one of the clinical research networks which forms PCORnet.
At the root of it all, what is the overall mission of PCORI and, by extension, PCORnet?
PCORI was created to fund research that answers practical questions that people have. And that's sort of a unique niche within the research ecosystem because the kind of research that, for example, NIH funds includes these sorts of things to a certain extent, but most of what they fund is discovery, uncovering new things.
Whereas PCORI and PCORnet are focused on
helping folks make better decisions based on the choices they have. We sort of live in a world that is an embarrassment of riches in terms of all of these great treatments, medications, but what we lack is objective evidence and research that actually says, how do you make decisions based on who you are to understand what works best for you? That was the niche that PCORI fills.
By virtue of its name, the work PCORI does and funds must be
patient-centered. What that means is that it's answering questions that patients care about, but it's doing it in a way that is also involving them in every stage of the activity, all the way from defining the questions, to planning the study, to executing the study, and then disseminating the results. We have a series of funding awards, but all of our awards actually have to think about not just how am I going to get the answer, but then how am I going to make sure that the community knows the result is out there, communicated in a way that they can actually use it.
PCORI has a strategic plan based on 4 main components, the first being the funding of patient-centered effectiveness research, or CER, which compares 2 or more approaches to treatment or management.
And they have to be things that are actually in clinical use. So for example, it can be comparing 2 different medications. One good example, a study that we recently funded, you've seen a lot of ads for inflammatory bowel disease medications. There's actually been a proliferation of medications and treatments in the last couple of years, but there hasn't been a lot of comparing them and understanding who may benefit from one versus another. That's what comparative effectiveness is comparing those 2.
CER also means patients are involved in deciding what research is funded.
Yeah, we involve patients and broader stakeholder partners in everything PCORI does, but we also require it as part of our funding. So we have a series of different national priorities and a research project agenda which help decide and drive a lot of the decisions that we make. Those were all determined through stakeholder outreach.
Who are PCORI's specific stakeholders?
There's a large list of them. Patients are sort of top of the list, but they include clinicians, families of people who are experiencing health issues, also, frankly, health systems, payers, insurers who are paying for a lot of this care, and then also folks like employers buying those plans. So it's very wide-ranging.
The second component of PCORI's strategic plan addresses infrastructure.
This is where PCORnet really fits in. So PCORnet is a research network. There is a data backbone to it, but it is much more than just a data network.
Remember when Dr. Grossman described PCORnet as a network of networks?
Well, that right now includes over 13,000 clinical sites, all 50 states in the country, and in 2024, 47 million patients went and got care at one of these institutions and therefore had a record that is now included in PCORnet.
But again, the infrastructure is more than patient data because
the commitment to patient-centeredness is very much embedded in PCORnet. Patients sit in every committee that makes decisions about how PCORnet does its work, what projects are done, what kind of questions they take on, and that ultimately it reflects the principles and the priorities that PCORI has as a funder of patient-centered research.
The third component, dissemination and implementation of results from the patient-centered research it funds.
If you complete your PCORI-funded award and it's successful and you have results that are ready to be disseminated, you can then apply for a follow-on dissemination and implementation award to fund those activities.
Or let's say you didn't lead the original PCORI-funded research,
but you are an implementation scientist, because that is in and of itself its own expertise. You can apply to PCORI for awards to do work to implement results that were otherwise funded by PCORI.
and PCORI has the Health Systems Implementation Initiative,
which is actually funding health systems directly to sort of create a learning network around the dissemination and implementation of PCORI results. An example of some of the things that they've taken on are some of the approaches around management of obesity, antibiotic stewardship, areas which are, frankly, in some cases, there's a lot of evidence, but what's missing is that next step and putting it into actual implementation by clinicians.
the fourth component of PCORI's strategic plan, engagement.
We have advisory panels that focus on different parts of our work. We have a rare disease advisory panel. We have an advisory panel specific to patient engagement, another one that looks specifically at clinical trials. These are all ways that we bring in community and experts to advise us on how to do our work.
Plus, when PCORI develops its funding opportunities, a fundamental part of that is
having conversations with maybe it's patient organizations, maybe it's community-based organizations, maybe it's professional clinical organizations, to really understand what are the evidence gaps, what are the areas for opportunity, what are the questions that they're facing as a way of helping inform our work.
PCORI's strategic plan is centered around a comprehensive set of priorities for our nation's collective health. Among these priorities, achieving health equity.
One of the things that's unique to comparative effectiveness research is that question of what works for whom when. And in order to answer the question of whom, you really have to understand how things work for different populations. And that's where things like disparate experiences across different populations and disparities in health outcomes and experiences with the healthcare system play in, and that's part of the goal towards health equity.
How is success of PCORI's mission measured?
Our goal is really to fund research which has practical use and implications for decision making. So how do you measure that? There are some of the more traditional ways of looking at research impact, like publications and presentations. But the next level is how are those then incorporated into things like clinical practice guidelines, payer policies, Medicare and Medicaid decisions. Those, I think, are the next level and where our alignment with success and impact comes along.
One particular success she spotlights.
We funded a study for patients with appendicitis, whether surgery or antibiotics were better or at least similar. Well, you might have heard of a show called The Pit, set in Pittsburgh in the emergency room. Well, there's a patient that comes in with appendicitis, and the doctor says, well, there was a study that actually looked and showed that antibiotics is just as good as surgery for a certain kind of patient. And that was a study that PCORI funded.
Very cool. Art reflecting real-life research. As for the success of PCORnet,
there's a lot of research networks out there, but one of the unique things about PCORnet is that it's meant to be open to any investigator who wants to do research that is in line with the general mission and priorities of PCORnet. So that means if you're looking to apply to NIH funding, industry funding, or CDC, PCORnet can be used by any of those.
Which is really important.
Because as stewards of federal funds, we always want to make sure the work that we're doing is benefiting the general public. And so one of the things that we've been doing, and part of the reason that I'm here, is we have been undertaking a massive outreach campaign. We call it the Roadshow, to really get the word out that PCORnet is this great resource.
In case you're wondering,
all of the results of our research have to be made public. So all of the results of our work are on our website for folks to look at. We take transparency very seriously, and so it's the mission of serving the American public and putting the results back out there. And we are always looking for folks to get involved in PCORI. And we always want to hear from folks, about what experiences they're having, what questions they have, and if there's opportunities for PCORI-funded research to help. We're always interested in that.
As mentioned, Dr. Grossman was recently at the Medical College of Wisconsin speaking at PCORnet's MCW Roadshow. Another speaker at the event we caught up with is Jeff Ordway. patient co-investigator for the Greater Plains Collaborative, and a patient representative voice for PCORnet, which at its core is
electronic health records data. They've managed to figure out ways for a number of institutions to talk to one another so that we can access that information and make sure that we can use it in research in ways that's meaningful for patients.
What's PCORnet's full name, and how long has it been around?
It's the National Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Network. It was launched in 2014 as part of PCORI and their efforts.
What's PCORnet's specific mission as an integral initiative of PCORI?
I'm going to start by saying PCORI, their mission is to fund research that is comparative effectiveness research. And so what they realized was that they needed a data infrastructure to be able to support that research. And so PCORnet at its heart is that infrastructure for that data to be able to support this research that PCORI likes to fund. PCORI is not the only funder who gets to use it, but they are the ones who paid for the infrastructure to put it together.
But it's more than just that.
It's that data, but it's also people like me who are patients who get involved, and we bring our voice, our experience to bear, and we, in many ways, impact the way that that data is used, accessed, and represented as different research projects are being put together.
Like me and you, Jeff is not a doctor, and he's not a research scientist. So how did he become involved with the integration of patient and caregiver voices into medical research through PCORnet?
So I'll start with what inspired me, and that is I am a person who lives in pain. I have chronic conditions with my spine which make it so that I'm constantly living with the fact that it hurts. My wife once said that she finally figured out she should stop asking, does it hurt, and start asking, how much does it hurt right now?
Pain, especially chronic pain, is a motivator, certainly to seek treatment. But in Jeff's case, his pain also motivated him to take other action.
When I walked into my doctor's office one day, he said, hey, we're doing this study. Would you want to be a part of it? As we were talking about it, they said, hey, how would you feel about being like a member of the study team rather than somebody that is a part of the study? And I said, what's that mean? He said, it means you show up to meetings, you talk to us, you give us your opinion about stuff. And I went, okay, why not? Sounds like fun.
So Jeff dove in head first, metaphorically, of course. And then
they also asked me to be on a patient advisory board at the University of Missouri, which is where I live. And so I started doing that. And it was an interesting thing to do, to feel like I was impacting things that were happening locally.
Soon, the scope of that impact and Jeff's commitment to it grew exponentially.
At one of our patient advisory board meetings said, hey, there's this new thing starting up that's a more national organization. Who wants to do that? And I raised my hand and said, sure, why not? It sounds like fun. And so I got involved as a member of the Patient Advisory Council for the Greater Plains Collaborative, which is one of the networks that makes up PCORnet.
Through his experience as a patient, and now as a patient voice in research,
I got to sit in meetings with people talking about how are we using what we know in order to be able to create research that matters to patients. And so it's not just the specific condition that I lived in, but my experience with the entire health system and my experience in trying to find answers for myself. All of that gets to be a part of what this whole thing is.
The more he learned and the more his commitment deepened, Jeff, well,
just continually raised my hand over and over and over again. And I went from being a patient advisor to being actually in the governance of PCORnet. Now I'm on the steering committee, I'm in the executive management team, and I work as a patient co-investigator for our local network, the Greater Plains Collaborative. So it's been a fun and interesting journey to feel like I get to impact how research happens.
Especially how it happens while being patient and caregiver centered.
We want to try and make research that improves the lives of people with lived conditions and the people who love them. And so it's important, I think, to make sure that we have patients in the room when people are trying to figure out what questions they want to ask when they go for funding.
What else inspired Jeff to become involved in medical research? Again, he's not a doctor.
Not at all. A former high school teacher, was forced into retirement due to my issues with my spine. And now I am semi-retired. I have a small farm in Missouri that I work with my wife and my kids. We raise chickens, and obviously still limited in what I can do physically, but no, there's nothing in my background whatsoever that is medical in nature other than the fact that I've been in and out of the system for so long.
Earlier, we heard PCORnet described as a network of networks. Jeff Ordway agrees.
We have what are known as clinical research networks. There are 8 of them. Each one is made up of medical institutions, many of which are associated with institutions of higher education. They are collected in these small networks. And so each network has its own governance structure, and there are patients involved in that governance structure for each one of those networks.
He says they all
Operate somewhat independently, but they also have a collective overview of what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And so the way that the structure is built, there's site involvement, network involvement, and then there's PCORnet involvement. So there's 3 levels to the structure.
of the 8 networks or collaboratives.
The Greater Plains Collaborative is the one that MCW is a part of. It has 14 institutions that are spread across the Midwest, some in California, a couple in Utah. And so MCW is a strong partner in that group. There's like 78 institutions that are represented across all of PCORnet, organized into these 8 different networks.
As a member of the Great Plains Collaborative Network, the Medical College of Wisconsin plays a vital role.
MCW's role is predominantly managing and maintaining data infrastructure for the network. They have really, really strong impact on making sure that we meet all of our milestones, to make sure that the data that we get is clean and it's stuff that data people care about. MCW is huge in making sure that that part of it takes place. So that tells you that the role for MCW is really strong.
Next, Jeff tells us why partnering with patients and caregivers with lived experience of illness is so important in research.
You might have a really good research question built on evidence that medical research has understood in the past. But when you come and talk to patients about it, they may not think that the question you're asking is a question that needs to be answered. And they may say, that's close, but it'd be more important if you asked this.
He gives a specific example.
A specific example is for people like me who live in pain. Most researchers think that we want to eradicate our pain. Most of the people that I know, we don't want to eradicate the pain. We want to drop it down to a level where we can have a functional life that is meaningful. But to eradicate it, A, it's never going to happen, and B, it's not necessary.
So, if you allow patient input from the beginning of the research process and listen to them,
you go, we don't have to make it go away. We need to figure out how do we minimize it and how do we help you have quality of life that matters. And so patients can bring that kind of input into a research question just to make sure that when you're looking at what are the many different topics that are available, what are the ones that are most important to patients and the ones that are going to provide the best quality of life.
Including patients and caregivers can impact research in other ways, including acceleration of research.
If you're trying to recruit a patient, talk to a patient. We got to look at the recruitment letter for a cardiac study written by a cardiologist, and you could tell it was written by a cardiologist. One of the patients took it and ripped it up and said, I don't understand a word this says. So you need to figure out how to say this in a way that I can understand it so I can tell you whether or not I'm interested.
Lesson here being, if you include patient input, even for recruitment materials,
your enrollments are going to be higher. Overall, you're going to end up being able to get your whole process moving faster. The faster you recruit patients, the faster your study can get done, the faster you can get to meaningful results.
Including patient input can also impact the protocol of research studies.
We talk a lot about burden. If you're designing a study and you think, I need to have your blood pressure taken X number of times, I can look at you and say, do you really need it that many times? And so we can look at what's the real number you need, not the number you think you need. Because every time I have to come to a clinic to give blood pressure, there's drive time, there's parking, there's walking. Is your study design actually doable, right? So we can talk about those kinds of things when we're trying to figure out how does this all go together?
Once a research study has results, how can patient involvement impact dissemination and implementation of the results?
One of the big problems with research in the past has been that people get involved in a study and then they never find out what happened with it. Information is not given back to the patients. Whether you find something or nothing, we still want to know. I mean, if you're not giving me anything back, then that's not helpful for me as a human being. And it also means I don't want to participate in additional stuff going down the line.
And consider how patients can influence where study results are disseminated.
Typical dissemination is an article in a medical journal somewhere, which is fine, but we want to try and get it into the hands of the people that actually live with these conditions. And so PCORnet has been really helping us try to find methods of dissemination outside those norms. Are there ways to get this into social media? Are there other ways that we can get this information out there to make sure that it's getting into the hands of the people who need it?
Bottom line, patient involvement is impactful in all phases of research.
We can be a part of everything from concept all the way through looking at the data, interpreting the data, and then disseminating the information. There's no space where patients cannot be involved in a research project.
Does partnering with patients allow PCORnet to offer a smarter approach to research?
I think anytime you make a focus of adding a patient voice, you're smarter. There's a lot of research that gets done, good research that gets done, without a patient voice involved. The problem with that, in my experience, is that we don't always know what happens with that research. We don't know where it goes. The beauty of what's happening with PCORnet is because people like me are involved at the levels we're involved, it's a constantly evolving thing.
And based on that ongoing evolution,
not only do we have a plan now for how it works, but we're always looking at how can we do better, how can we do more, how can we speed it up, how can we make all of this process work, not only for us as the patients, but for the investigators who are looking for funding, trying to find ways to get funding, because adding a patient voice will improve the research proposal, improve the design, and many times will improve your chances of getting the funding for the research.
PCORnet supports researchers by facilitating their research work in key ways, such as electronic health record or EHR data for research.
Every time you go to the doctor, there's a whole lot of information that is captured. And if we can access that information, we don't necessarily have to come to you every single time we want to get a question answered.
Now, don't worry. All electronic health record data used in research is
completely de-identified, which means there's no way any bit of information could ever be tracked back to you. We make sure that it's behind all kinds of firewalls. It's not easily accessible to outside actors because, let's face it, I don't necessarily want everybody on the planet to have all my information. At the same time, I don't want to hide it if it can mean that somebody else's journey through the medical system is better than mine was.
Like Dr. Grossman, Jeff was in town for PCORnet's MCW Roadshow.
Roadshow event is a way for us to present information about PCORnet to people who have never heard about us or have limited exposure. We hold these events where we talk about what is PCORnet, how does it function, what's the data look like, and hopefully people who have things that they'd like to investigate will think of PCORnet as a method for accessing data so that they can ask better questions and have better results,
making it an important resource for our research community.
We've got this incredible thing that has been built over the last 12 years. There are 78 institutions nationwide that have figured out how to get information systems to talk to one another so that we can ask multiple systems for information. MCW is tied into this larger, greater thing where you can ask bigger questions.
And our patient community as well.
You can talk to somebody at PCORnet for free. They can talk to you about resources, tools that we know about. You can access the data. They can really help you access our entire system and come up with ways to make things happen. But start at the website, which is PCORnet.org.
Jeff says there's nothing quite like being a patient voice, especially on a research team where
everybody else has a PhD or an MD, but I'm just a patient.
A patient with a powerful voice in research.
They may not listen at first, but at some point they're going to hear what you have to say. And it's really important that we hear from people directly impacted. It helps everybody remember that every single point of data is a human being. Each one of those is a person. So let's remember that.
And with that reminder, we're all out of time for this edition of CTSI Discovery Radio. As always, thanks to each of our guests for appearing on today's show, Dr. Claudia Grossman and Jeff Ordway. I hope you've discovered something by listening today, and I'm doubly hopeful you'll join us again next time. CTSI Discovery Radio airs the third Friday of every month. On behalf of the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeast Wisconsin, and all of our affiliate partners and members, I'm Brian Belmer, wishing you happier, healthier days ahead. For more information about research or to listen to the podcast of this or any of our shows on demand, please visit our website at ctsi.mcw.edu. CTSI Discovery Radio is written, produced, and hosted by Brian Belmer in collaboration with WMSE Radio. The CTSI and this program are under the direction of Dr. Julie Freed.